James Ernest of the Grueling Truth, here with Armen Keteyian of the Tiger Woods' new book, along with, you wrote the book along with Jeff Benedict?
Jeff Benedict, yeah.
So tell us, why Tiger Woods?
Well, Jeff and I, we had done a book together called The System, which was this very deep dive into big-time college football, and that was back in 2013 when it came out, and we were looking for another sort of mountain to climb in terms of a book. And you know, you think about athletes or even any kind of personality that is known by one word, and Tiger certainly, you know, qualified in that category. And you know, the more that we looked at his life, and the more that we looked at what had been written about it, particularly in the book category, there were several, but none of them really were a 360-degree immersive biography. They were all tied to certain times in his life, either turning pro or after the scandal in '09. And so Jeff and I decided to jump in, and it turned out to be this 3-year project that you know, took a lot of our lives during that period.
What are your thoughts about this weekend's results from the Masters?
Well, I thought, you know, the Masters this year, there was a lot of hype and hope when Tiger was coming in, but you know, that tournament in Augusta National is just a completely different experience as far as shot making is concerned. And Tiger, by his own admission, his irons were just off. They weren't as dialed in as they had been, certainly when he was winning majors. But I thought his round on Sunday when he shot 3 under 69 showed, and it could have well have been a 65 or a 66. He missed several short putts that he ended up 3-putting. But I thought in terms of just how he handled himself and playing with Phil in a practice round, and you know, we've noticed, and our book certainly reflects at the end a different Tiger Woods. He's more gracious, he's more appreciative. Frankly, he's more human in his interactions with people than he's really ever been. And I think that stems from what happened to him on Memorial Day weekend in 2017 with the DUI incident in Florida, where he was really out of it, didn't know where he was. And I think for Tiger, that was rock bottom. Coming out of that and reflective on his life and where he was at the time, he's a different person, and that's good, because the first 41 years of his life, as we chronicle in the book, are pretty darn complicated.
Do you feel that he's had the greatest impact on golf?
Well, I think you have to look at people like Arnold Palmer, who was, you know, game-changing as far as golf is concerned, and I think Jack, to a certain degree, was similar, but I think there's no question Tiger changed the game in more ways and in bigger ways than any golfer in history. When you look at his impact socially, changing the face of the crowds, the kinds of people that were coming to golf tournaments who had never come before, certainly racially, and being the first African-American athlete of African-American heritage to win the Masters, becoming the kind of corporate spokesman he was for golf, and then changing the game unquestionably financially. When Tiger broke in 1996, the total purses on the PGA Tour was $63 million. And this year, they're going to be $360+ million. The average complete tour purse per event was $1.7 million. Now they average $7.1 million. And, you know, this week at the Masters, or this year at the Masters, the winner took home nearly $2 million. So, by our calculation, Tiger's impact financially, he helped make more than 400 tour pros multimillionaires, not $1 million in total earnings, but more than $2 million in total earnings in their career. So, he's to us, he's a transcendent figure in the game of golf, and a transcendent figure, I think, in American sporting history. He was the most famous athlete on the planet for the better part of a decade. But honestly, what we saw is what Tiger wanted us to see, and what Tiger's corporations and his sponsors wanted us to see, and what his inner circle, Team Tiger, wanted us to see. And what you see in our book, in Tiger Woods, is the answer to the question is, who really is Tiger Woods, and what is the price of genius? And that, frankly, is something that has been protected by his inner circle for the better part of 20 years.
Obviously, the biggest factor of why he was such a phenomenon and such a big change was just his overall talent and his impact in the game. But after that, do you feel his age at getting younger people to play golf, or his race at getting more diverse people to play golf, was a bigger influence?
Well, it's interesting because everybody talks about and had predicted that there was going to be this influx of African American golfers into the game, and that's really, ironically, the one area that Tiger hasn't really had a major impact. His foundation, the Tiger Woods Learning Centers now, have been far and away and had a greater impact on young people's lives. I mean, tens of thousands of kids going to college that would never have been able to go to school and higher education if it wasn't for those learning centers. But I actually attended several junior world events, IMG junior world events, looking at the makeup of the elite players from all over the world. And honestly, there's only a small handful of African American golfers that are coming up through the junior ranks now, and there's only one African American golfer, Harold Varner III, who is a full-time member of the PGA Tour. So, Tiger changed the game in a lot of ways, but he did not change it, the color of the game, at least not at the elite level.
Do you feel that, with his impact in the game and just his overall success, that he could possibly be considered the greatest athlete in modern history?
Well, I think when you look at his record, I mean, he's second all-time to Sam Snead in tournament wins with 79. He's on tour wins, official tour wins, 14 majors, second obviously to Jack. The first athlete ever to earn more than $1 billion, off the course. $110 million in prize money, official prize money. But beyond that, I mean, he was just a pure genius with a club in his hands. Physically, he changed the game. We all know that, as we watched him get bigger and stronger, and how that has impacted the game with players like Rory McIlroy now, and others that are spending time and working out in ways they never had before. But also his pure creative genius on the course. I mean, in our book, we are well aware of that genius, and we remind the reader of it in certain sections of times of Tiger's life, whether it was in 2000 when he hit in back-to-back tournaments, hit two of the arguably the greatest shots of his career. One at Firestone in Akron, Ohio, at the famed course there on the 18th fairway. It's so dark because of a rain delay. There's literally people on the green with their lighters lighting the green, and he can barely see the ball. He's got a 160-some yard shot, 8-iron, and he can barely see the ball. He has to get down on his hands and knees to look at the line. He hits literally a shot in the dark that lands 2 feet from the pin, and he taps that in for a walk-away win at Firestone. And then, his next tournament is in Canada at the Canadian Open, and he's at the famous Glen Abbey course there, and he's on the 18th tee, and he hits a drive into a bunker He has a 6-iron, 213 yards from the pin, trees right over a huge expanse of water. There's basically no room between where Tiger is in a sand trap and the green other than water, and he hits it 2 feet past the pin. I mean, these were shots that, first of all, nobody in their right mind would even try to attempt, and second of all, pull them off. And so, those kinds of shots and playing essentially on one leg in his last major victory in 2008 at Torrey Pines at the U.S. Open, just an incredible demonstration of an indomitable will. So yeah, I think Muhammad Ali and Tiger are probably the two names that are brought up time and time again with us, and Muhammad Ali's impact socially and racially, culturally is more significant, I think, because he embraced his race and change, where Tiger, in many ways, distanced himself from that. So if you're talking, social impact, I think the two names are, you have Muhammad Ali probably at the top of the mountain, but in terms of greatest athlete of the last 30, 40, 50 years, he's in the conversation, that's for sure.
How big of a role did his parents play in his development?
Well, they were huge, and I think that's a very good question. In order to understand Tiger Woods, both the pro and the con, you need to understand his parents, Earl Woods, his father, and Tita, as she's known, his mother. And if you just start with Tiger's first name, Eldrick, the E in Eldrick literally stood for the E in Earl, and the K in Eldrick literally stood for the K in Catilda. So he was surrounded by his parents from the time that he was born, an only child, living in a small 1,474 square foot home in Cypress, California. On one end, a father who loved the game of golf and loved the passion and the practice and the desire to be better. Earl was a very good golfer in his own right, but he gave his son that passion and that love of practice, and at the same time, he was, the visionary who saw his son as the chosen one, who was going to literally change the game of golf and impact nations in terms of names like Gandhi and Buddha. That was the expectations that Earl placed on his son's shoulders for good and bad. And then Tita was a force in her own right. She was in many ways the original Tiger Mom. She was the one that brought the killer instinct. You take their heart. That's what she would tell him when they would drive in the car between tournaments. You beat them in ways that they remember. So Tiger's cold-blooded assassin, that will that he had, was the byproduct of his mother, not his father. And then you add a very complicated relationship between Earl and Tita, more of a business partnership than a pure marriage. And Earl, a man of enormous appetites when it came to women and alcohol, and that certainly complicated things between he and Tita, and Tiger witnessed all that stuff because he was around his parents. So yes, I think that if you were looking for one theme in our book, certainly in the early years, before Earl passes away in 2006, it's a triangle, with Tiger, right in the middle of it.
How did he get such access to the people in his circle that they've been able to block for so many years?
Well, Jeff and I have been doing this a long time in terms of journalism, and what you really have to do is you start on the way outside and you work your way in. And for us, that meant reading every book of significance that had ever been written about Tiger, either by Earl Woods or Tiger put out a book a year ago commemorating the 20th anniversary of 1997 win at Augusta. Stevie Williams wrote 2 books. Hank Haney wrote a book. His first teacher, Rudy Duran, wrote a book. There's plenty of them. And then you have some of the best golf writers in the business, Tom Callahan, John Feinstein, John Strachey, Tim Rossiford, a British author by the name of Howard Soons, who wrote a fabulous book called The Wicked Game, in which Tiger was a big part of, though he didn't participate in. And so when you have that kind of a base, and then you start reading books about Buddhism, Navy SEALs, gifted children, sex addiction, that becomes the base of your knowledge. And then we had access to unusual access to Sports Illustrated's famous library of clips, of which we were able to get our hands on thousands of stories that about Tiger, that had been written about Tiger and his parents and his father. And then Jeff and I put together a timeline that ran at one point in time 120 pages that broke down Tiger's life sometimes into weeks, not months, and certainly not years. And then I was able to get access to some 300, the transcripts of some 320 official press conferences where Tiger spoke at, and we mined those press conferences for his insights and his comments about certain things that were happening at certain points of his life. And that's where we were before we really started to get serious about interviewing people. So we had names, and we had people that may have only been quoted once in Tiger's entire life, or mentioned, but had never been interviewed. And we found a number of those people. We interviewed more than 250 people from every walk of Tiger's life over the course of the 2.5 years of reporting that we did as we were writing the book in the last year. So, this is an enormous undertaking, and you have to have a certain kind of journalistic skill set to write a book of this magnitude, with this scope and this detail to it. And it's frankly not a book I could have done, 10 years ago. It wouldn't have been nearly as good. And the fact that I could do it with Jeff, we trust each other. He's got tremendous credibility, and I trust his moral compass on things. And when you're as high up on the wire as you are, when you're doing books about people as famous as Tiger is, who are surrounded by people who do nothing but spend their day trying to protect him, you got to be A, very, very careful, but B, you also have to have a certain kind of tools in your toolbox.
So it sounds like this is going to be the complete book about Tiger Woods that no one else has ever been able to read or write before, and especially with your all's background, having the two of you collaborate and come together to write this book. Probably
I guess,
New York Times bestseller, I would bet.
Right, and the reviews, have been extraordinary for the book. Including one from the New York Times, called it exhilarating, a perfectly pitched biography. We were praised in the Wall Street Journal, the Financial Times, the London Times, by Bloomberg, by Golf Digest. Providence Journal called it fascinating. It's not us saying and bragging so much about what we've done as it is now when the book is out and others have had a chance to read it. It's their praise. And I won't say it's the definitive biography, because he's only 42 years old, and even though it seems like he's lived 2 or 3 lifetimes to that 42 years, but I think it's fair to say to this point it's the defining biography of Tiger's life, and it's really a book that can be enjoyed by certainly the hardcore golfer who plays every weekend, but it's also written for women, because Tiger's relationships with women are very complicated and very interesting in this book. And it's also a book about a transcendent star, as you would for somebody like Leonardo da Vinci, or like with Hamilton and people like that, people that have lived extraordinarily interesting lives with Shakespearean-like drama in them, And that's all brought to life on the pages as well. So it's working on as a book on 3 or 4 different levels.
So if fans are wanting to learn more about Tiger, the book, where on social media would you recommend them check out?
Well, Jeff Benedict has a Facebook page, and he has his own website, jeffbenedict.com. And I'm a little less interested in engaging in social media. I have a Twitter feed at Armen Keteyian, ARMEN KETEYIAN. That is where you'll find me commenting on, and other people commenting on the book. But that's about it. I mean, it's available now everywhere. I think as I speak, it's number 4 on Amazon's bestseller list. It's not hard to find at this point, thankfully. But it's in truth, when you spend as much time as Jeff and I did working on a book like this, in the end, it's funny. There's no copy on the cover of this book. It's just half of Tiger's face, and our names are on the side of the book, on the spine of the book. And in many ways, it was purposeful. It was purposeful because we didn't want to get cute with the name other than Tiger Woods. We just want to let the reporting and the writing speak for itself, and thankfully, those that have read it have appreciated it.
Yeah, it's an excellent book. Fans definitely need to check it out, and we greatly appreciate you coming on the show to talk about it.
Well, thank you so much.
It's been our pleasure, Armen. And what's next for you?